Hey everybody, it's David Jenkins with Fonville Morrissey Realty. I'm a residential real estate broker here in the North Carolina Triangle. And I want to talk for a minute about the North Carolina Association of Realtors document, the seller possession after a closing agreement, which can be used as an addendum to NCAR's offer to purchase and contract. Now, why would a buyer and seller be interested in having an addendum to the purchase contract which would allow the seller to stay in the property after the closing? Primarily, it's the seller who might be interested in something like this. For instance, let's say that a seller wants to both buy and sell. And let's say the seller needs to use the proceeds from the sale of their property to buy the new property. So if that's going to happen, the seller may, without this agreement, the seller may want to be buying and selling on the same day, have two closings on the same day. It's very stressful because what if one of the sales is delayed? Or all of the stuff is in the moving truck as the buyers do their final walkthrough, maybe the night before the closing. And the recording doesn't happen on time, and so that stuff is still sitting in the moving truck. Wouldn't it be great if a seller could sell their property, go to the closing, get the money, but still be able to stay in the house for another week or two or maybe three. And then during that time, they would be a tenant in the house they used to own. And then they'd be able, on the buy side, without any worry, to buy the property, the money's already in the bank, with some ease, and have a little bit of overlap of being able to stay in their own house after they sold it as a tenant and buy in the new house and then have a leisurely move. Wouldn't that be great for a seller? That's the number one reason why a seller would want to agree to this, is the convenience of getting their money early on the sale of a property before they have to move out. Why would a buyer want to do this? Well, in a multiple offer situation, if a buyer keeps losing out and they say, oh, how can I make my offer stronger? Well, they might offer this to a seller in order to get their offer accepted. Another reason why a buyer might want to do this is if the buyer has a lease somewhere, and let's say that lease expires in, say, 2 or 3 months, and they are closing on a property in, say, 1 month. So then for a certain period of time, the buyer is renting a property, and maybe if they have a loan, they're paying a mortgage on their new property. They're making 2 monthly payments, but they can only live in one place. They would love it if the seller could stay in the house they just bought for a little while and pay rent, which would cover the mortgage, until their lease expired in the old place. So that might be why a buyer might be interested in something like this. But it's for short-term purposes because it doesn't cover things that a lease agreement might do. For instance, there's not a security deposit in this instrument, as there would be in a lease agreement. There is a clause in there whether or not pets are allowed, but there's not a clause as to what happens if at the end of the duration of the agreement, the tenant, the old seller of the property, fails to get out. What are the court costs? Who's going to pay them? How are they going to be evicted and things like that? It is understood that the seller, now a tenant, would be paying renter's insurance for the property. The owner of the property, who's not living there, would have homeowner's insurance, hazard insurance, but that would not cover the personal property of the tenant. So the seller, once they become a tenant, would need to get renter's insurance. It's a little bit risky because, for instance, the old owner of the property, the current tenant of the property, might damage some things on moving out, maybe unintentionally. The carpet is damaged, or the buyer is not able to do a final walkthrough before purchasing the property in the way that they could do without this agreement, because it's not going to be a vacant property. They can't really see what they're buying. And there's risk, as we said before, that the seller may not get out when they said they were going to get out. So it's important to assess the risk before making this decision as to whether or not to have a seller possession after closing agreement. But it's a valuable document, and it can help make a buyer's offer stronger, and it can also be very useful to a seller so that they can get their money from a sale but not have to move out from the property immediately. I hope that makes some sense. If I could answer any questions about that or anything else regarding the purchase or sale of residential real estate in North Carolina, please give me a call. Thank you.